Welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. You know that. You know that. I mean, this is an opportunity for us to, I think, to break down a little bit the facade here of what's happening. You know what you're listening to. You're listening to it. You chose to listen to it. Am I already suffering from the, locked-in quarantine syndrome here? I don't know. I woke up yesterday. It was Friday, the 13th, and I was just thinking about all the musicians I know, all of the creative people, all of the cats who were on tour who had to cancel their tours, all of the people whose work had fallen through, all of the stories I was hearing, and thinking a lot about how we're going to respond to these conditions here. And sitting at home in my studio where I normally sit is very little change to my daily routine, but I know that for so many, there is a major change happening. I opened up Instagram and I saw the great guitar player Charlie Hunter was doing one of his live stream jam sessions. And he said, you know, if we're all locked in at home, we might as well get together and listen to some music. So here I am. And then he was, responding to all the comments that showed up in the comments section. And there was some real connection. There was some real interaction and some engagement. It felt like a bunch of people were hanging out with Charlie Hunter. And I thought, right, that's... You guys know Roland Kirk? What's going to happen now is we're really going to have to turn to the tools that we have in place already through social media to get creative and to explore this space together. The music you hear in the background is that Instagram Live performance. I decided to make some phone calls. I reached out to a bunch of friends and ultimately even talked to some people I'd never talked to before to see how coronavirus, how COVID, how quarantine, how social distancing was affecting them, their work, their sense of what their professional life is going to look like in the immediate future, and also to get a sense of how they're thinking in general. I often have felt that creative people are very sensitive to just real questions of humanity. So I called all over the world. I called my friend JJ Telesforo, who's a singer and a producer and a radio and television personality in Italy, and he's locked in his house in Sutri outside of Rome in a small town. He's been there for a week, can't leave his house. His new album came out this week. He lost a week of gigs all over Italy, and I talked to him, and then I talked to a music manager, Andrew Lieb, who was on an airplane heading out of town because the project that brought him to New York got canceled. Then I talked to Victoria Canal, who I spoke to for the podcast only a month or two ago. This is a real moment for her in her career. She had 30-something dates that fell through. She was headed out of the country to go see her family in Holland. Saxophonist John Ellis, trombonist Ryan Keberly, bassist Joe Dart, guitar player Adam Levy. All of them weighed in on what this meant to them and how they thought about what was going to happen moving forward. And then I talked to Ari Herstand and Jack Conti. Both are based in Los Angeles, and both have a relationship both with the creative process and also the business aspect of the new music business. Ari writes books and blog posts about the state of the music business today, the independent music business, and Jack Conti is a multi-instrumentalist. He has the bands Pomplamoose and Scary Pockets, but he also started Patreon, which is a platform that people can use to monetize and support ongoing creative projects, not unlike this one, by the way. Patreon.com/Third Story Podcast is where you could go to support this podcast on an ongoing basis, or you could just head over to third-story.com and hang out. I mean, what have you got to do? This is the time to catch up on all your Third Story archives. Which reminds me, it's a little bit of a long episode. I let it go. It's 90 minutes long because we've got some time on our hands. I, for one, have already made a long list of creative projects that I hope to get into in the next week or so. Everything from pulling the studio apart, cleaning everything, reorganizing, maybe a little software upgrade. Maybe it's a time for me to get my hands on a copy of Ableton and really figure out how to use that software. Maybe it's time for me to write some songs. Maybe it's time for me to make more podcasts. I don't know, but I'm trying to think of this abundance of time as some kind of an opportunity. But let's be honest, there's also a huge amount of fear, and it's hard to create when you're feeling fearful. So I did the only thing I know how to do, which is reach out and talk to other people. And I finished up with a little check-in with my friends Joy Dragland and Lage Lund, two musicians who just left New York at the end of last year after years of living here and moved to Norway, which is where Lage is from. He got a job teaching at a conservatory, and they are in full quarantine house arrest there already, and got a sense of what life is like for them. Let's get this ball rolling here with my friend JJ Telesforo in Italy. I'll check in with you at the end of the episode. Enjoy these conversations I had just yesterday. COVID Chronicles Volume 1.
You guys got to check out Rassan Roland Kirk. You know what I'm talking about?
JJ Telesforo in Sutri, Italy.
Oh, yes. Here I am, and I can't move, man.
How long have you been inside your house?
Until now, maybe it's a week. A week in my house, and I'm lucky because, I live in the country, so I have my garden, my dog, and my cat, and I can walk around my place. And also, I'm lucky because as musician and artist, I have my home studio, so I have a lot of.
But JJ, you have a record coming out, and you had a tour scheduled for this week and next week all over Italy, right?
Absolutely. So about the tour is completely done, and I really hope to have the chance to do these gigs maybe in another period, maybe in the summer or maybe in the fall when the club and the theater will work again. But it's very funny for me because in this period I have to promote my album. And the title of my album is Il Mondo in Testa. So the world in my head, but also the world ahead. So I think about the world in this album, and it's very funny because now I'm completely closed, locked down in my place, thinking about the world, thinking about people, and thinking about how I can promote this new album that is scheduled to be out on March 27th. So, it's totally surreal. And I have to do promotion.
So what are you doing? You doing promotion from on the internet? What are you doing?
Yeah, of course, internet, doing little video clip, doing interviews by phone with journalists.
Yeah.
But I can go around Italy promoting as usual, doing radio shows and television, nothing. Because the way we live now in Italy is completely different. So also I can see television.
Yes.
And in the studio, you can see only the journalist, but no audience, no.
Yes.
There is nobody.
And for Italians, it's very strange because you're kissing each other and you're touching, and you're a very physical culture.
Absolutely, it's terrible, man. It's terrible. We are changing, but I spoke with your father yesterday, and I love him because he's a fantastic musician, but at the same time, he's an intellectual.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
And he said, JJ, don't worry, because after the bad period, I'm sure we'll live other beautiful moments.
Yes.
So we have to believe that people will change in positive.
Yes.
And it's very important because right now we are just humans. There's no black, no white, no yellow. So we are all together fighting against an invisible enemy, and we are all together. We need to be together.
This is a democratic disease.
This is a democratic disease, but we live in democracy in our countries, no? And sometimes democracy doesn't help too much.
Yes.
Because people, they think that maybe they can do their own interpretation of democracy.
Yes.
Okay. But now it's time to be very serious.
Yes.
So your government says, stay home because it's dangerous. And you can be the guy that brings the virus in other places. So it's better if we
democracy
stay home
is
now.
good for jazz, but bad for the virus.
Absolutely, man. Totally right. Totally right.
JJ, I love you, and I'm thinking about you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Leo. I love you too.
Andrew Lieb,
Your buddy.
manager extraordinaire.
Something like that.
Tell me what your life has been like for the last day.
I'm sitting in an exit row on my flight because I was supposed to fly to Miami tomorrow to see a client who was about to do a 2-day stint. New Deco Ensemble was supposed to do a special orchestral collaboration with Robert Glasper.
Wow.
And they actually just announced that the mayor of Miami has tested positive for coronavirus. So a lot of the city is starting to shut down, including the AD New World Center,
Yep.
around 700 capacity. And so we're now closing it and just doing a filmed content capture while Robert's still in town. But, the 2 nights, have been canceled. And that city's going in lockdown. So that's one of the things I'm dealing with. The other is Victoria was on a tour. Victoria Canal was on a tour with Tall Heights, who they were supposed to go to Canada today. They were in Brooklyn yesterday, which we've canceled everything. And she was then supposed to hop off and go with Leslie Odom Jr., and that tour is looking like it's canceling as well.
So do you have any sense, I mean, it's just shifting every minute, but I mean, do you get any sense of what this means in terms of your business and the business of being an artist right now?
Obviously the live event component of our business is really strong, and we're certainly in the touring season, and the spring and summer kick up with festivals. I mean, it's a really important time for artists. That's one of their main sources of revenue nowadays. What I think it means is, leaning into the idea that these artists create art for people to escape, and there are other ways to convey what they do without doing it in person. And, I'm already toying with ideas of live streaming things and doing concerts, collaborations online and things like that, so people can kind of take their mind off stuff as things are happening. But, I mean, of course, the fact, because it's not just the artist not playing the show, it's the bartender that can't work shift, or the door guy, or the security, and the trickle-down effect is so intense. So, it's definitely a time of uncertainty.
It's funny because you sort of just answered a question that I was going to save for more artists and less business people, but it is exactly that. Like, what is the role of the arts and the artist in a time of uncertainty?
To me, it kind of feels like a weird time to, like, promote a record.
Yeah.
Or, push a upcoming whatever. I think it's more of a time for people to step up and say, I'm going to do what I do to provide some solace for some of these people that are, statistics continue to go where they go. Everyone's going to be affected by it, not just with the impact of cancellations, but friend of a friend, grandparent, cousin, whatever, so everyone's going to need that escape, and, music certainly has the ability to do that.
Yeah. Andrew, safe travels, man. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Meine Freund Daniel von Deutschland ist hier jetzt. Meine Lieblingsfreund.
Victoria Canal.
Hello.
Where are you?
I'm currently in Boston. My whole tour was canceled. I had 30-something shows scheduled. They're all off, and my parents, who live in Amsterdam, have encouraged me to fly home as soon as possible, so I've gotten the last flight direct from here to Amsterdam, and I fly out at 10:30 tonight to be safe and close to family rather than on my own in LA. So that's what's going on.
How do you feel about this?
I feel totally freaked out. Honestly, I can't lie. I think the silver lining in all of this is that I'll have plenty of time to songwrite and create, and as will other creatives, because we're all going to be basically like practicing social distancing, and hopefully this will all blow over soon. But my dad works in the medical field, and he's expressing a lot of concern in terms of just everything, particularly in the United States, like shutting down the hospitals, the schools, the gyms, apparently, according to him, hospitals in the United States can only really provide for 20% of the population. So imagine 20% gets corona, but then there's also like all of the people who
normally go.
Who normally go, who need assistance or attention. So it's pretty scary. I can't lie. I feel like the world is ending. And I think the part egotistically that frustrates me most is that I have a lot planned for my career. I've got big dreams, and I really, really believe in them. And so right now I'm just trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and hoping that this incubation period will come out with with fruit on the other side.
How do you think it's going to affect your music?
I don't know, man. I don't think it's the end of anything, honestly. I'm holding on to hope here. I think life works in interesting ways, and as long as you make, the best out of any situation, that's the only thing you can really do in times like these. Whatever's out of my control, I can't really spend too many days dwelling on. I mean, I'm dwelling on it as I fly home, and I'll be far away from my city of choice and my career of choice. Everything's going to be on pause, but it doesn't mean it's on stop, So I'm pretty sure a lot of songs will come out of this time, and a lot of good moments with my family, being close to family. I think right now is just the time to lean on our closest loved ones and just duck and cover.
I thought about you today because you and I, when we had our long interview recently, talked about how the internet is a real community and that Instagram was a real place of connection for you. And you met a lot of people and connected with them legitimately through social media. Your whole career from day one has happened with social media.
That has been an amazing part of it. Like seeing that everyone's still connected and communicating. Just because the real world is shutting down doesn't mean the online world is. You know what I mean? That's the funky part. Is like now we can kind of lean on the virtual world and take more stake in it during this time, stay connected and to share with each other.
I wanted to talk to you because your attitude when it comes to finding positivity in the face of adversity, making creative choices when it seems that they are difficult to make. I just wanted to hear your voice today, and in some ways, I guess I'm even more freaked out knowing that you feel like the world is coming to an end because even though you're young, I rely on you to make me feel good.
Well, I never expected life to be free of a bumpy road, I think it's completely normal to freak out, but it doesn't mean you can't overcome it. And so to deprive myself of freedom to be worried is inhumane almost. But to trust in my own ability to process this feeling and come out stronger is totally my right, And so I wouldn't say that my response to you is discouraging. It's more so like I'm feeling what I'm feeling, and then I'm going to make it into art, and then I'm going to move on to the next feeling. But it doesn't mean I'm going to ignore how I feel. I'm going to feel as deeply as I can, and then get through it. You understand what I'm trying to say?
I understand what you're trying to say, and I look forward to hearing what the art is that is created by your deepest feelings. And but more than anything, good luck, safe travels.
Thank you. Thanks for calling. I look forward to hearing what everybody else is saying. All right. See you soon, buddy.
All right. Take care.
Stay safe.
All right. You too.
Take care.
Bye.
Oh, Greg's in the house.
John Ellis.
How are you doing?
I'm cool, man. I never leave my house.
You've been on self-quarantine for years.
It turns out I was just way ahead of the curve on this thing.
I see that.
I'm talking to you, you're on the streets of Manhattan walking to a rehearsal.
Yes.
So how are you feeling about all of this? I just looked at your calendar and you don't have too many gigs on the schedule, although I know that often your calendar doesn't fully represent what you're doing.
Yeah, that's true. I think the hardest thing about it is there is just incredible uncertainty. Uncertainty about everything. Uncertainty about what is our schedule going to look like in the future, and uncertainty about how long is this thing going to last, and just all the everything. Like, what are the right things to do? Should we stop our life entirely? Should we keep doing some things? Where's the line in terms of what's the right thing to do and all that? I think that just kind of adds to anxiety, and not the easiest thing to answer those questions. Like, I played at Smalls the last 2 nights.
Really?
Yeah. So
and how'd you feel?
I felt really mixed, Like, I felt, on the one hand, I felt like, oh, maybe this is a little scary. It's like, my girl is scared about that a little bit, and also Smalls is a petri dish under the best of circumstances, probably, right? And it's very, very small, and you're all pressed up on people. At the same time, it's very healing and therapeutic and cathartic to have music, especially improvised jazz music for people's sort of psyche and soul and all that, So that actually felt real too.
Yeah.
So that's the tension. And actually, at Spike, at Smalls, seems to be struggling with that. Like, you know, the Vanguard is closing for a month. The Jazz Lincoln Center is closing down. Everything is closing. Like, gigs are getting canceled.
I was thinking about you because, you know, over the years, you and I have talked about how, like, you love the idea of having more space in your life just to practice and just to play, just, you know, without the pressures of, like, having it be a gig. And on the other hand, you know, that'll only take you so far, and you keep your overhead pretty low anyway, but you still got to make a living somehow.
I mean, yeah, right. I mean, I would say for the first time in my life, I feel kind of positioned to ride this out without falling off the edge financially.
Wow.
But because it's so new, you know, mostly because I have really affordable housing, you know, which is like really a new thing for me. But I lived on the edge always, right? Like, so, and I'm not unique in that, in my world. So just tons and tons of us are like, your tour gets canceled, and then your next tour gets canceled. I mean, I played, Yasushi Nakamura was on the gig last night. He said he had 3 tours canceled.
Yep.
Like 3 tours. That's very, very significant. Like,
yeah.
You know, and depending on how close you are to the edge, which so many people are, that's going to be, you know, problematic going down the road.
Yeah.
You know, and I think with the uncertainty, that goes back to uncertainty, right? Because now everything is like, oh, for a month, we're going to take a little pause, or 3 weeks or a month or whatever. But, you know, I don't think anybody thinks that, like, oh, okay, so in 3 weeks, then we're just going to start back to normal.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's just basically like at that point, then we have to sort of see again where we are. And it doesn't appear that we are going to be in better art shape than we are currently. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's really troubling. I mean, it's also there's a thing about New York that I've always said, which is that if you want to survive as a jazz musician living in New York City, you travel overseas. Basically, you export the music to an overseas audience, and you also import the audience from overseas. Like, a good percentage of the people that listen to jazz in the clubs in New York they don't live here. So it could be a double thing where your opportunity to, you know, be an ambassador and go somewhere else and bring the music decline or stop. And then also the people that normally come to New York and hear jazz from other places, they don't come either. Sort of anybody's guess. I guess I was trying to finish something about Spike. You know, Spike's, I think he's really torn because he's like, I don't want to be irresponsible. At the same time, if everybody's closing, maybe it's important to have a space where people can just come and play jazz, you know, or listen to jazz.
It's small, but as you said, maybe it's good that it's small because it keeps the numbers contained, and they do keep canceling events that are more than 200 people. Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly.
But to me, the thing about it is, like, you know, in the times in my life when I've been brave in the face of danger, for example, like after terrorism, I've been on the road when there was terrorism, and we had the decision of whether or not we were going to play in the face of that. There was something that felt oddly brave and heroic and cathartic about doing that, but this may be foolish. That's the question, is like, this is a virus.
I totally agree, and yet it may not be, right? I mean, I guess that's the thing. Like, it's I think it's so hard in the current climate of things to gather together the right information that makes you feel like you're making a responsible choice. Yeah, I just think that the uncertainty is so pervasive. It's so, like, in every direction that you look for what's the thing. You know, how should we move forward? And I just think that's part of what makes it so difficult. I mean, not to mention we don't have trusted leadership.
Yeah.
You know, like the leadership that can be counted on to give us the unvarnished truth. You know, and so I think also because the information ecosystem is so fractured, so people get different truths from everywhere anyway.
And there's a kind of for me a philosophical question underneath all of this also, which I think started to kind of reveal itself to me after the last election, and now this is like another iteration of it. What does it mean to be making music in the face of real serious danger? You know, is it more important or is it more frivolous to do it? You know, or both?
I think that's an excellent question. I think in the face of this, if making music is absolutely endangering other people, right? Because there's one thing where you're like, okay, well, I'm fairly young and fairly healthy, and therefore if I get it, there's a fairly good chance that I survive it, right? So that's just a self-oriented lens. But if I get it and give it to somebody else, and they give it to somebody else, and you could easily be sort of unwittingly responsible for causing other people harm. So like there's the community responsibility that has to be considered. At the same time, like evaluating to what extent, like what is the risk, like how high is the risk, and at what point does the risk counterbalance. There's the risk of getting the virus, which is a very serious risk, and there's the risk of all the things that could happen. People get the virus and they get sick, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a very significant risk in the collective panic, like the collective fear, right? Like that is also part of the issue, right? Like everybody's freaking out. So if there's some aspect of what you do as a musician that heals people, that reminds people of a certain normalcy, of a certain humanity, is that not also important? And like to what extent, right? Like to what extent is that? And I don't know. I mean, the thing with Small that I talked to Spike about that I think would be an amazing idea is, it's when you get to the point where it really is irresponsible to have people in there as an audience. There's no reason you couldn't still have gigs there.
Yep.
Just for the stream.
Yep.
Right? So everybody's stuck in their house, but they can stream it, and then you lose some of the, there's nothing like being there, but it's better than nothing. And then, musicians are still playing.
I think it's going to be that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be these kind of weird workarounds and oddly creative solutions to this to make sure that it stays alive. And one of the things that I'm hearing you say is, as a jazz musician, particularly, the risk of contracting a virus is one of many daily risks that we all live with, or that many musicians live with anyway. The uncertainty of just surviving is so great that a little virus doesn't seem to disrupt your thinking too much.
And maybe to our great detriment, right? I mean, I know that it's hard for people to break habits, right?
Yeah.
But there's a coming together in times of crisis that feels really good. That may also be exactly what we shouldn't be doing. So I don't pretend to have the answer to that, but I do think that it's a very unsettling, difficult thing to try to sort through. I mean, I do think that part of it is getting sorted out by everything is getting canceled.
Yeah.
Pretty catastrophically. That may solve some risks, hopefully, or buy time. It's also a question of, what are we really accomplishing? We're buying time, right? That's really all we're accomplishing.
They have this idea of social distancing, which, makes me laugh when we're talking about jazz in particular, because it's like...
Yeah, we're good at that already.
But, I mean, that's the idea, is that the less opportunity for exposure, the less it's going to be transmitted.
And I think that's correct, except for the end result, right? So the end result is, people talk about the difference between containment and mitigation, right? Those are like the two terms that they use, like at the CDC and all that. So containment is like, this person got it, we know where they got it, we know all the people that they got it from.
Yep.
And we're going to quarantine them in a kind of serious way, and then we can block its spread. Like, that's essentially a lot easier to do that in big societies in an autocratic situation, for sure. Like, so China can do that. Once you get into a place where there has been community spread already, meaning that this person has it, we don't actually know how they got it. We just know that they're in this region. We sort of know that they've been in touch with this number of people or whatever. That's when the social distancing starts, and that's like mitigation, right? So that's just time. That just means we're going to try to slow it down.
Yep.
Spreads more slowly. Scientists can race to try to figure out what to do about it.
Yep.
My understanding is we're not in a place where it's like, oh, cool, we'll just stop it.
Yeah, right.
I don't think that that's actually in the cards for our society in the current reality that we live in. So, so there's that, right? It's like, okay, so mitigation, social distancing, okay, that's cool. I mean, we should do that. But we're still just buying time, right? I mean...
Well, yeah, this is real. We're buying time. How much time are we buying? I mean, at what point do we lose music?
Right.
Do we lose musicians? Do we just lose music? Like, we're going to lose concerts? We're going to lose sports? We're going to lose restaurants?
Like for 6 months or a year. That's the other thing, right? It's clearly not for 30 days. I certainly have been trying to be guided by the sense of how to maintain some normalcy.
Well, right. I mean,
also be prepared, but also be prepared for the worst, and don't do anything really foolish that may cause me to be in a situation where I'm endangering other people. I mean, I'm truly not very afraid to get it. I mean, maybe I'm stupid, but I'm much more afraid to pass it to somebody, who's more high risk than me. Yeah,
we have to reach into the depth of ourselves and ask ourselves the question: are we generally good? I mean, at the core, is humanity good and capable of making the selfless decision?
Like, when you frame it like that, I'm not sure that people. I think if people considered it like that, it would be a different type of decision. I don't think that they are. I think it's more like do we even have agreement about what good and bad is, and do we agree about the information that we're getting? Like, do we agree about the risk? Do we equally understand the risk? I mean, how could we? Like my understanding of the risk, I feel like, changes by the minute. Seems like you can, in a really incredible top-down authoritarian type of system, you can have some real results against something like this. I don't know. I mean, Italy's an interesting test because they're sort of weren't like that, and now they're trying to see to what degree they can be like that. But
they also had Mussolini less than 100 years ago. You know, I think they can get in line when it's time.
maybe, but you know, like when they started to lock it down, like a huge number of people got on trains and flights and and left. So they took it with them, I'm sure.
I guess my final question for you right now is, are we as improvising musicians, as jazz musicians, in any way better prepared to deal with the shifting circumstances around us? And I'm not even just talking about from the lifestyle of having lived with uncertainty and not knowing where your rent money is going to come from 6 weeks from now or 2 weeks from now, but is there something in the practice of improvisation that we can use in this experience?
I think that's hard. I think the short answer, the best way I can think of the answer to that is absolutely yes and absolutely no. In the sense that, like, philosophically, being flexible, all those things, I think yes. I think absolutely yes. But because of the general closeness to the edge financially that so many people live, I think that it sort of negates that. I mean, jazz musicians are really, really likely. I mean, all freelancers living close to the edge are really, really likely to be impacted by this in very, very serious ways, more than the rest of society. We can just work from home now, or now we telework, or now we, at least for a while, there's these kinds of, sick days even are weird for us.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like, but just the idea that, like, you have a job where you continue to get paid even if you don't go to work and all. You know what I mean? Like that, all of that stuff is like totally foreign to us in normal circumstances.
Yes.
And I think now it's like, okay, we're canceling all gigs and we're canceling all flights and then it's like, well, are we canceling all rent and like all food costs? And, you know what I mean? Because otherwise, you can be flexible philosophically, but that can only get you so far if you don't have any money. Like, and that's real. I mean, that's going to be very, very real for a lot of people that I know. So, I mean, even with my incredibly fortuitous housing, like for how long, right? Like that's like how long.
And also, like, I see people online saying, "Oh, I'm going to sell stuff online. I'm going to ramp up my Patreon. I'm going to do this." To who? Who can pay for it though? Nobody's making any money.
That's the thing, right? If this thing is serious, the economic consequences of this are very, very big. I mean, I do think, in the ideal world, in terms of taking advantage of the time, like what you were talking about before, I mean, I would love to practice and write music and maybe even record. Yeah. Like, recording could be good. There is the crazy part of me that's like, oh shit, everybody's tours are canceled and they're all home. Like, let's make some records.
Yep. Or at least get your flute chops in order,
Yeah, right. All of it.
John Ellis, man, I just needed the nourishment of your point of view today. Thank you.
Oh man, please, I enjoy getting from you too. So call it, let's do it.
Let's do it more. Let's keep it up. Sounds good, man. All right. Have a good session.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Ryan Keberle.
How you doing, man?
I mean, I'm here in Brooklyn, just in my room that I never leave anyway. I'm hunkered down, but you actually got on an airplane and flew to France.
I did, man. I'm out of my mind, I guess. It's a long story, and it involved a lot of careful thinking and research, but it was just for one gig, which makes it even crazier in some ways. But the gig was, we had videographers set up to film it. We don't have any live video footage. We had the French national radio stations broadcasting the gig, like kind of their NPR. So they were, and everything was still going on. Like the club, this is the last gig actually for the club, and then they close tomorrow. And then, my bandmates live here, and like they were ready to do it. So I'm like, we got to make this happen one way or another. So we'll see. Coming back tomorrow, we'll see what I have to endure at JFK.
What was the vibe like on the plane over there?
Totally cool. Actually, the plane was relatively full. I mean, it wasn't packed, but it was more full than I flew back from San Francisco on Tuesday, and that flight was absolutely empty. I've never been on a flight with that few people before.
What's happening with your future gigs?
So the rest of the tour, which included a couple of gigs next weekend in Brussels and Spain and Paris, it all got canceled today. And ideally postponed, rescheduled, but no one wants to commit to anything right now. So they say they want to reschedule, but no one actually wants to give us any dates. They're all like, oh, let's wait and see. So yeah, who knows?
And what about your teaching gigs?
So as of Wednesday, CUNY canceled classes for a week in order to allow the professors to transfer our entire curriculum online. We'll be doing virtual teaching from here to the end of the semester.
So what do you think this will mean for your career and the careers of your friends if the next 6 months are basically without any real gigs?
I think it's going to be disastrous. Not for me. I'm super, super fortunate to have a teaching gig and to have a spouse who has a regular income. But I'm thinking of my friends who are single and living in New York, paying a lot of money on rent like everyone, and who are sidemen and who don't have a choice whether or not their gigs are canceled, don't have any say in the matter, and literally are going to be playing $50 jazz gigs now in New York, which is not going to cut it. So I don't know. I mean, I know that the Musicians Union has some kind of emergency fund if they're members, but many people aren't members in our community.
Ryan, man, I had to call you because you are the only person I know in the last 24 hours who actually got on a plane and went to Europe to make a gig.
I know. Well, listen, I didn't do it callously, or certainly not without a lot of thought. I mean, I don't want to be one of the spreaders of anything, but I've been careful, and like I said, everything kind of made sense to do this one, and then this is it. I'm getting back home as quickly as I can. So,
well, be safe, and I'll see you back in Brooklyn, man.
Okay, see you, Leo.
When you talk about all that bass, do you mean like Milt Hinton, Oscar Pettiford, James Jamerson, Bob Babbitt, Rocco Prestia?
Hey, man.
Joe Dart.
Hey, how are you, Leo?
I'm good. How are you? Where are you?
I'm fine, man. I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan, as it happens.
You were on the road with Theo Katzman, and you had to cancel the last few gigs or postpone them.
Yeah, man.
What did it feel like watching this thing coming at you from the last week of gigs?
Man, it was totally surreal. I mean, we were all, to varying degrees, glued to the news, glued to the New York Times app for the, most of the tour.
Yeah.
Really, which started in the beginning of January, but really kind of starting in February and the last leg of the tour, we were basically hearing about things getting canceled. And then when South by Southwest got canceled, that was when it really kind of hit home. And we were all pretty shocked by that and felt like kind of a snowball after that. And then really in the last week here, it seemed inevitable. When we started to see huge events getting canceled and started to see cities and states, putting a cap on, anything over 1,000 people or even anything over 250 people getting canceled events-wise, it started to become clear that this was going to be an inevitability. And finally, Theo just made the decision himself to cancel the final weekend of the last 3 shows here in the Midwest.
How do you think this is going to have an effect on you personally, on what happens next for you?
Yeah, I'm just kind of keeping my expectations realistic here. I think it's entirely likely that a number of things that I've got on the books right now will be canceled or postponed. I've already had a session that was to be this week in Michigan. A couple of guys in the band live in Europe and couldn't come over after this travel ban.
Yeah.
So, they were going to come on like Monday and, travel ban on Friday night. So, there's that, which we're going to do remotely. It's going to be fine.
Uh-huh.
And then, gigs and festivals. I'm hopeful that things will get under control. Things will go forward, but I'm entirely prepared for things to get canceled and postponed. And, among my friends and, broader musician and artist community, I mean, it's hitting home. It's going to take it's going to be a real financial burden.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Of all the people I could have talked to, it's kind of funny talking to you because you're so nomadic and you kind of live, wherever you are at the moment. So, in a funny,
very true.
This is just what's happening to you right now. You're perfectly prepared for this, actually.
My sort of musician vagabond lifestyle, might be well suited to a time like this where I'm just setting up shop wherever I might be, and if I have to, change things around, stick around for a little longer, I feel lucky in that I can. I've got a decent amount of flexibility, so I need to stick around the end of the tour and work from the Midwest for a little bit. I'm lucky to have my buddies and my bandmates here in Michigan, and family and friends in New York, and my bandmates out in LA, and we'll see where everyone hunkers down, or how many people are moving around, how many people are staying home, but one day at a time at this point.
The thing that is kind of interesting is that, one of your bands, Wolfpack, is such a video-forward studio project that comes alive as much on the internet as it does on stage, and in that way, like, this has no impact,
Well, that's certainly a real silver lining is if things are going to have to be remote, if things are going to have to be streaming, video-based, couldn't ask for a more conducive project than Wolfpack's to switch over to YouTube. So that's cool, and I'm very thankful for that. But I also, I'm a big, playing live is a big part of my life and my passion and what gets me really excited. So I'm very, very bummed and yet hopeful for the rest of the year.
Joe Dart, thanks, man.
Dude, Leo, it's a pleasure, man. I'm happy to talk to you, and I'm really wishing everybody safety and wellness, and glad everyone's taken the proper measures here to try to slow this thing down, contain it, and I'm just watching every day, but I'll definitely be talking to my friends and bandmates around the country a lot over the next few weeks, try to get a read on things, see what's next.
Yeah, this is the time to check in with our friends and stay connected. That's exactly right. Well, I hope to see you when you're back in Brooklyn.
Absolutely, man. Hope to see you this spring and summer. And man, thanks for calling.
Thanks, Joe. Be well. Bye-bye.
Hello?
Adam Levy.
Hey, Phil. How are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Good.
So, man, what does it feel like in LA? I saw that you had a gig booked with Rich Hinman the other day that got canceled. What are you feeling there?
Yeah, that gig, I should say, we canceled the gig. That wasn't a case where the venue made the choice and we had to deal with it. We as a band were talking about it, and it just felt like we wanted to protect ourselves, and also just do we want to be the reason that 50 people are getting together in a room? And to be honest, I wasn't sure that was the right thing, but I think in retrospect, it will be the right thing. I was supposed to last weekend go to Seattle to do a show and also a guitar workshop. And that was a case where I actually was the one who felt like that wasn't the best thing to do in light of Seattle being sort of an area where you keep hearing a lot of news and getting on a plane, going in and out of Seattle. I'm not always a germaphobe or like I kind of hate to admit this, but I can't remember the last time I got a flu shot. I mean, I wash my hands and all, but anyway, your question was, what's it like in LA now? I'm giving you way too much backstory.
Yeah, but you know what? You one thing that you did say there that is curious to me is, maybe you haven't had a flu shot in a while, but the other thing that affects many musicians is that our relationship with just the medical system in general is tenuous because it's so hard to get insurance.
Yeah. So I, for years, didn't have insurance and didn't see doctors, and just, if stuff came up, I would use urgent care.
Yeah.
And I think it's, a lot of musicians and creative people, that's kind of where they're at. And when I was getting married 3 years ago, my now wife, then my soon-to-be wife, was like, you need to get health insurance and see a doctor and all that stuff. So I have insurance and I have doctors, and I did actually catch up on a lot of overdue care that I now have, and I'm also a lot less careful about doctors and the whole thing. Which, I think as musicians, some of the thing about the medical industry is just the cost and the insurance part of it. And then the longer you don't go, maybe it just starts to just be like, well, I don't know what that is. I don't want to do that.
Well, here's another question that I feel like, you are the kind of thoughtful, kind of creative person who maybe can help me think about, which is really a version of a question that I started thinking about after Trump was elected. What is our job in challenging times as creative people? And does it shift when the context around us shifts? And incredibly, this thing is making Donald Trump's presidency look a little bit innocent, which is amazing, because this is like really putting the fear of the other side in all of us, And does that make you think about just what you're doing when you pick up the guitar, or when you teach, or when you perform, or just about what we're doing in general?
Wow, I like that question. I don't know that it changes things a lot for me, because I mean, just only because I think about that stuff all the time anyway. And, why do we do what we do? And who is it for? And, what does it mean? And when I first started playing the guitar, it really wasn't to be an entertainer. It looked to me like two things. It looked like a possible way to make a living. And that looked possible because my grandfather was a musician and did very well in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s. So it seemed like a possible career path. But I didn't look at it as like a way to get attention. It was just like, okay, here's something that I could do to make a living, and I seem to have a natural aptitude. But it was also something I did a lot for myself. I was a bit of a daydreamer when I was a kid, and maybe still am. And so a lot of times sitting down to play the guitar was just kind of a world to escape into. Maybe some people do that in other ways, but that's kind of what it was for me. So the idea that, as it's turned out that a lot of my working life these days is teaching and touring. And the touring part is kind of funny to me because it doesn't square up with the daydreamer part of me, who would really be happy to just sit and play and kind of have a place to go. Maybe some people could say it's like meditating or like playing some kind of immersive game or something like that. It's not to me like a big entertainment. That's not the reason I do it. So, but over the years, the part of it that's been fun for me to share has mostly been to smaller groups of people. And the touring is such a different thing because it's like harder in a way for me to feel connected to the people. And some of the best moments of playing for people have been more like when I've had opportunities to just go and play for people who are stuck in a hospital or, more of those kind of things. I mean, I remember when I was touring with Nora in the early 2000s, we were doing a gig in the DC area, and she got asked to go to a USO hospital and just go room to room and sing for some of the folks who'd come back from Afghanistan and other places. And as more time goes on, I feel like if the question about what's music for, maybe for moments like that, if you can reach people. But in light of what's happening now, that wouldn't be something that we could do. We couldn't. Getting together, playing for people in that kind of way is just not something that we can do now.
But the one thing that we can do now, for example, you started teaching guitar online years ago. You sort of developed a way to communicate certain ideas on the internet. And, I've been talking a lot in some of my interviews in the last couple of years about how Instagram is a real thing for especially for younger people. They connect legitimately and authentically through social media.
Sure.
And it seems like what may end up happening here is we really have to turn to those tools to communicate with one another for a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something I've been thinking about just this morning about. One, using those tools and not looking at them as a side thing, but as the thing. I still, do live Instagram sometimes, and I've done it sometimes when I just have a slow day, or sometimes I'll do it if I'm working on some new material, and it makes it feel a lot more real to me to play music for people live, even if it's electronically, just that there are people there. It's like my heart beats faster, and it's a very different experience. So I maybe don't experience it the same way that somebody who's young and has grown up with social media their whole life experiences it. But still, when I want to feel connected to people, I will do that. And I can feel in my body a change of this is different than sitting in my practice room. And so maybe there'll be more and more of that. And I do encourage my students actually to do that when I first started songwriting, and I think I might have even mentioned this when we spoke a while back, I used to go down into the subway and busk, not so much make change, but I was new at being a singer-songwriter, and it was an opportunity for me to, instead of just playing a 45-minute set at Rockwood every couple of months or something, I could just every day for the cost of a Metro card. If you don't happen to live someplace where that exists, I'd always tell my students, do Instagram stories, do live posts, so that you do get the sense of that there's somebody on the other side of what you're doing, and that's a big part of what we do it for. The other thing that I said, I was thinking about two things. The other thing is, for a lot of musicians I know, a lot of us don't think really far ahead.
Yeah.
Which also ties in with the thing you're saying about insurance and doctors. We don't think about next year or 5 years from now. And so it's hard if you're not managing your finances in a way that, if you're only 2 or 3 or 6 weeks out from a real crisis with work, that's hard. And I do know a lot of musicians who don't think really far ahead, but I think that at this time it is an opportunity for musicians to try to think about, okay, this particular season is going to be really tough, but maybe there's a festival next year that I could be applying for now, or maybe there's some kind of grant or project or I just know a lot of musicians, and myself as well, who aren't thinking about 2021 or 22. This could be a time to do that. And,
this is definitely a time to do something. And I think, I'm asking the question, but what is it? I mean, that's why my first impulse was to just call a bunch of friends and just say, what are you thinking about? And share that conversation with people, because obviously we're going to have a lot of time to do something with. And some people are going to use it creatively and incredibly, and other people are going to not have that privilege, and and others are gonna get depressed, and I mean it's gonna affect people in different ways.
Absolutely. Musicians sometimes, especially those of us who are side people, think of work as being defined by the work that other people hire us for, and forget that work is just you doing the work. And there's, like you say, it's a privileged thing. Some people just may not have the luxury of saying, I'll just take 10 weeks off and not worry about making money. I mean, I get that. That's not everybody's reality. It's a rarefied thing. But I also know on the other end of, or on some other point on that spectrum, there are just musicians who they might have saved up. Maybe they had a good year last year. They went on tour. They're not in any real danger, but it's still freaky that the phone's not ringing or that things are getting canceled. And even though they're not in any danger of going hungry or being homeless or those kinds of things, they still are freaking out. But you can still, if you have the luxury and the time, like right now we have a lot of time. We maybe don't have a lot of resources, but if you have them, maybe it's time to redefine what work is.
Yeah.
Give yourself projects so that you're doing something instead of just waiting for the rest of the sky to fall.
Yeah, man. Adam, I could talk to you for another hour. I can feel it, but I'm going to call some other folks and see how they're feeling.
Okay. Thanks for the time, man.
Ari Herstand.
Leo.
You know what I'm thinking as I'm dialing the number to call you is...
What's that?
You have positioned yourself as like a kind of expert, and now I want to know what I'm supposed to do with my life.
Turn off CNN. That's going to make you crazy. That made me crazy. I turned it on for 15 minutes last night. I went insane. Yeah, stop watching the news.
Okay.
Number one.
Okay. That is the head in the sand strategy of self-preservation.
We need to keep our sanity at this time. There's enough panic going around for all of us. So, how are you doing?
I am, as a person, a human being alive in this time, living in a densely populated city. And as a father of a child and son of septuagenarian parents, I am not feeling great. But as a self-employed person who essentially makes my living in a solitary room in my house that I almost never leave, and I make money writing a lot of jingles, I have a feeling I may be okay for a little while.
Yeah, that's great. I'm now, a big part of my business is online education.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking like, oh, I should be okay because it's a great time to be in the online education business, not the physical education business with all the schools shutting down.
You may be right. But if everybody's losing money because they can't work, who's going to pay to take your class,
100%. And that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
And I just got off the phone with a friend of mine, and she's already lost students. She teaches lessons, and a huge part of her business is FaceTime lessons, Skype lessons.
Yeah.
And she's already lost students because of that specifically, in that it's not just they're afraid to go outside and go up in public. It's that they're losing work on their end.
Right.
And now they can't afford to take lessons. It's the ripple effect.
Right.
So I'm very concerned about that for sure, especially because, all my students are musicians and now they've lost all their live revenue for the next foreseeable future. And so personally, I'm concerned about that, but I'm also more concerned about just artists in general and how they're going to find alternative revenue sources. And so that I'm actually working on an article right now that I'm going to post fairly soon just on what artists can do, what musicians can do in this time now that all their gigs are canceled. So working on that.
Right. And, and then there's this whole other question, when you're looking at real possible calamity on a global scale, does it matter how we monetize our original love songs?
Oh my gosh. I mean, now we get to the existential crisis here. We can't really live in despair with a doomsday mentality, because then we might as well just call it quits right now. So we just kind of have to get through the moment and alter our routines and just kind of, we're creative people, and get creative in how we operate our lives and businesses for the time being. I think that's something that we have that is to our benefit, is that we're just naturally creative minds and creative people. And so I think we can get creative in this time. And we just have to, because we're also sensitive beings, we just have to be careful not to get drawn into the panic, because that's really easy. I found myself on the brink of tears last night after 15 minutes of CNN saying how 30 million children rely on public lunches, and if they cancel school, then all these kids are without food. I'm like, this I can't even think about that. Like that should not have to be my burden. You know, and like, but as like a sensitive person and artist and creative, like I feel that weight. And so I just have to protect myself and protect my psyche however I can, but also be conscious of that and you know, not quite head in the sand and still be informed, but there's extremes on both sides. And I think just for self-care purposes at this time is it's important to just keep reminding ourselves that.
It's so interesting, right? Because, you know, a big part of what you're describing is the fact that the news cycle right now is actually, it has almost shrunk to zero. It's like every time you pick up your phone, there's another little piece of news. And that is also an indication of how connected we are and how connected we can continue to be, not only in sharing scary news, but in sharing any kind of connection, human creative connection right now. 2 months ago when we had our last conversation, I was asking the question, is the internet good? You know, is Instagram a good place to go to connect with people musically? And now it's like, well, guess what? It's what we got, you know?
Yeah. And I think we can be grateful in this moment in time for the internet, is that we have these tools available. And I was also thinking, as I'm working on this piece right now, to engage kind of this patronage model. And I know that you're about to speak with Jack Conte, who runs Patreon, but the patronage model, by enabling our biggest, and no other more graceful term, our richest supporters, our richest fans, you know, to enable them to support us in these times where we maybe have built our businesses on a live front, and now we can kind of shift gears a little bit and figure out how we can engage, I mean, all of our supporters and fans, but especially enable some of our fans that have more means to support us in bigger ways. You know, that's, I think we were all familiar with crowdfunding and how that has worked now for the last decade. But patronage can really be a bigger part of that, and appealing to everyone, saying if you want us to continue to create, and this is meaningful for your life, to actually give in a bigger way, not as charity, but as a value proposition. To say, if this brings value to your life proportionally to what you have. What you can give. And, you know, I think like, you know, public radio has kind of mastered this over the years. But also religious institutions too, you know, a lot of them say it's like a percentage of your income, or like, you know, I think biblically they say it's 10%.
I
of
like
what you
this
have
creative tithing
creative
for the
tithing.
arts. I like this.
With streaming, we've kind of, it's been a race to the bottom and a race for the numbers. It's kind of just we need more streams and more people and all of that. Whereas like if you run in the complete opposite direction and say, well, let me engage with my biggest supporters right now and offer packages or items that would be meaningful in their life, but not, it's not as much of a transaction as it can be an offering.
Ultimately, what I'm hearing you say, big picture, is there is, even in crisis, opportunity. And it's not necessarily only economic opportunity, but it's an opportunity to reframe the relationship between the artist and the audience. And something's going to happen. Somebody is going to make some creative choices right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, some of the most innovative decisions and creations have come when we have been in moments of crisis.
Yeah.
So I think we could, look at this as an opportunity and as a time where, we do reframe the relationship between artist and patron, and in a real meaningful way. And when this whole crisis blows over, hopefully very soon, I think we will have reestablished kind of a new normal, hopefully, of what that relationship can be in a more meaningful way, which I think has been a long time coming. I think the groundwork has been laid, and I think people have been testing it. We have definitely not reached that tipping point of how patrons can support the arts and artists on every level, but maybe this will do it. And, with Kickstarter 10 years ago, there's the whole discussion about, well, is that begging and is that charity? And then we got past that mode, and then Patreon came up, and like, well, you just need a gazillion supporters to get the 1,000 true ones that will support you to live on. But I think it can be, I just don't think that artists have actually set up the mechanisms in a meaningful way where you don't need 1,000 people to pay you $100. You could have 100 people pay you a few $100s. You could have 10 people pay you a few $100s a month, And I think a lot of artists, myself included, have had supporters over the years, and in the Silicon Valley, in the tech world, they call them angel investors and the angels. And I think there are angels in every aspect of the arts. It's just artists, musicians especially, have not facilitated this way to engage. And so I think the tools are there. This might be the time where we turn that on and work out that financial new normal of engagement.
Ari Herstand, thanks, man.
Yeah, it's nice to talk to you.
Stay safe, stay healthy, wash your hands.
Wash your hands. 20 seconds.
20 seconds, sing the song, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good night.
Thanks, man. All right.
Lead Belly.
Jack Conte.
Mr. Leo, how are you?
Hey, man. Nice to meet you. Tell me, has this been, as you've been watching the events unfold this week, what have your thoughts been, both as an internet creator and also as somebody who created a platform for other people to make stuff and get paid for it?
Maybe the first thing to say before we jump into this is I'm hearing from so many people, there's so many different opinions and different needs, and literally everything is changing by the hour at this point. Like every couple hours, I'm opening the news and seeing things that are changing, what Patreon is doing and how we're operating, and we're building plans. And there's so much unfolding so quickly that we're kind of in a position where I think one of our investors called me yesterday and said it the best. He was like, "Hey, we're all trying to figure out what to do right now." And I think that was kind of a poignant way of saying it. I think everybody's trying to figure out what to do right now. I know that's maybe trite or simple, but it's really true.
And you included, I'm hearing you say that even the platform itself is trying to figure out what to do right now.
Yeah. How can we help? What can we do about this? What should we organize? Where should we lean in? Where should we lean out? Who do we talk to? What do our creators need from us? Where can we be most helpful? There's like a lot of things that we're trying to kind of sort through right now. We have a bunch of ideas, and we're actually doing a live stream next week where we're going to work through a lot of this with the community present. We're going to bring in a bunch of creators, and we had a bunch of folks lined up for South by Southwest that were going to give talks on the future of music and streaming and creativity, et cetera. So a lot of them have agreed to join us on this live stream, and we're going to have some of these panels and discussions, what to do in times of uncertainty for your creative business, et cetera. So yeah, we're trying to just organize the community and have conversations and connect people so that we can work through it all together.
One of the initial questions that just occurred to me today when I started talking to people, and I hope it's not a cynical question, is when you're looking at a pandemic, when you're looking at something really serious, how do we as creators, and I think we all have to answer this differently, how does that reframe what we see our job to be? It's great when we're creating music or creating anything and sharing it, and it's fun, and it's a way to engage with an audience. But this is like a really serious time right now that we're looking at. And I just wonder from your standpoint if you've thought about that.
Yeah, definitely. It's one thing to call it social media. It's another thing to think about what is the function of the free media and the free press, and disseminating important information, holding people of power accountable, holding institutions accountable. Mm-hmm. And I think when we talk about social media, we often forget about some of the functional purpose for the existence of media in the first place. And I think some creators embrace that. And kind of realize and want to perform those functions. They want to be leaders. They want to kind of act as press or media in some capacity. Mm-hmm. And some creators don't want to. They just want to make art. And I think honestly that's totally okay. I don't think you have to practice accountability as an artist. Like you don't have to hold institutions accountable. But this is moments like this, I think there are creators who are realizing, oh shit, I've got 200,000 followers, and when I say something, it really matters. Mm-hmm. And so what can I say to kind of make a difference here? Yeah, I've definitely seen those kinds of creators, leaning into that responsibility or opportunity rather than responsibility. Look, some creators want to do that and some creators don't. And I don't think that the creators who, we shouldn't judge folks who aren't doing that, I suppose. Well, but I do know that a lot of creators want to.
You are also a creator, and you mm-hmm. create a lot of regular content. Has this, as a creator, how are you thinking about this right now?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. I actually literally just did an Instagram post today announcing this streaming session. I've been talking with a bunch of other creators about some things that we can do to organize and raise some money, and mm-hmm. there's some announcements coming out pretty soon. Yeah. My band Pomplamoose, that I have with my wife, a lot of the folks that we work with on a regular basis, they're touring musicians. Yes. and they're taking a massive hit right now. Like they're looking at their next 3 months and they've disappeared. And so we're trying to figure out what we can do, and we're still figuring out all the details and logistics of it. But yeah, we're definitely leaning into, multiple fundraising efforts and community organization.
Between Pomplamoose and Scary Pockets, you really are very skilled and adept at creating content online and building community online. And as you say, so many of your friends have been touring kind of more traditional musicians. Do you think that there is going to be space to accommodate all of these people who now have to find some creative outlet, some place to both express themselves and also hopefully find a way to get paid in the next number of months?
Yes, I do. And I've been accused of being too much of an optimist before. Yeah. But I don't care. I think, the way I feel about this is a little bit like that line in Jurassic Park where they're saying like, how could two female dinosaurs mate and create, and create more dinosaurs? And then they turn to the scientist and he goes, nature finds a way. Yeah. And I really feel that way about creators and artists. Like I've met now literally thousands and thousands of artists through Patreon and Pomplamoose and otherwise. And like ingenuity, just sheer horsepower in terms of smarts, adaptability, entrepreneurial spirit. Creators like embody, this kind of do-it-yourself, independent, I'm going to figure it out mindset. And I think creators will find a way. Yeah, if there's one thing I've learned just watching creators thrive on Patreon and figure out how to make it work, is creators find a way. So yeah, my like optimism or or positivity, even in a moment like this, is not touched.
It makes perfect sense for creative people, for musicians, for artists, for people who aren't able to do what they do in the normal circumstances, to think about connecting through, social media, through online tools, through Patreon, whatever. But the fact is, everybody's about to go into a little bit of an economic crunch here. There's so many people that are going to lose money, and it starts to become a question to me of like, well, how do you even ask people to spend money right now when everybody's tightening the belt? Part of me thinks maybe this is a time to focus on creation rather than on monetization.
Yes, of course, to some extent. And also, everybody still needs to eat and pay for their groceries.
Right.
and folks who have a house, it's not like the bank's going to say, okay, take a couple months off your mortgage.
Yeah.
So, yes, I agree. It's good to focus on creativity, and now is a great time to do that. And there's just realities of life that aren't going to go away. What I have heard. Gosh, I want to be careful. I want to be so careful about misinformation and relying too much on hearsay. But I have heard some stats that I think, are encouraging, at least for online digital creators. Mm-hmm. So I heard, and again, if you use this in the episode, please surround it with some kind of caveat that I'm not entirely sure of these numbers or even if this is true. But I have heard that, when China basically went through that period of intense shutdown and quarantine, internet companies saw, like TikTok, for example, saw a big increase in traffic.
Yeah.
I also heard that in Italy, internet usage spiked quite a bit. I think the number I heard was 70%. And I think recently AT&T or someone else, I don't even know who it was, is like eliminating limits to some extent or something like that.
Right.
And I think, online creators actually might be getting more audience and exposure and attention in a period like this, especially as people are going home and spending more time in the four walls of their home and not being outside and at work and doing other things. So, it may actually lead to, a lot of creators getting discovered and having more of their stuff, reach an audience.
That seems very clear to me, is that there's going to be a lot of room for creativity, for innovation, for people to work with whatever the tools are that they have. We have a captive audience right now. People have less distraction if they're sitting at home also. So they're probably spending more time, online.
Yeah, I think so. All the kind of data points that I've seen around that point in that direction, that actually this is when a lot of people are spending even more time online, and creators might even be easier to find an audience and might see a spike in things. The flip side of that I've also heard from a couple folks, and by the way, again, I'll point it out. I want to be very careful with the information that I claim to know here.
Yeah.
All of this is conjecture, right? At this point, right? We don't know this, and so there's a bunch of different opinions about what's going to happen. So I'll just preface it with that. But I have heard people express fear around what if there's all this extra content online, and some companies that maybe had big advertising spends, have to cut their budgets due to an economic downturn, and so advertising inventory drops, and now there's all this online content, but advertising revenue goes down because there's not enough companies advertising on top of it. Then our monetized views goes down, et cetera. And so I know some folks are worried that, the combination of more available online content minus the amount of advertisers and advertising dollars pouring into the ecosystem could yield just a pretty different looking landscape in terms of ad revenue generated from online content.
Yeah. What advice do you have, or how do you suggest that people sort of start to explore the space?
The first thing that I would say is, like, over the next couple months, if you're the kind of person who's like, I really should work on the online presence.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Now's the time. I mean, like, here's the kick in the pants that you've been waiting for. And, there's so many tools. I think one thing that I would encourage creators to do, it's funny, there's quite an old company called Stage It that I used to use with my wife. Pomplamoose would do a 45-minute paid live stream, and people can buy tickets. And we would set up a little mixing board. We'd plug in a couple microphones and a guitar and a piano, and she would sing, and I'd play some instruments, and she'd play bass, and people can pay for tickets, and they can tip on top of the live stream too. And we would make a few $1,000,
Whoa.
with a 45-minute show. We'd sell tickets, 500 people would show up, and then they'd tip on top of the stream, and they'd request songs, and it was awesome. That website is still around. You can still do paid live streams, and the infrastructure is there. So the web is full of these little nuggets and great tools and things that you can do. I mean, you got to be able to drive audience. I think that's kind of what it relies on. That's what the internet relies on. It doesn't solve the audience problem. But if you can drive audience, there's plenty of tools online for, how to kind of convert that into a paycheck for yourself at this point. In 2013, when Patreon launched, that was not the case. Patreon was one of, you could count them on one hand, the number of companies that would send you a check at the end of the month. But now there's, a bunch of ways, interesting, cool ways to make money as a creator online.
Jack, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me about this. At some point, I'd love to sit down for longer and talk about your music as well, because I really am a fan. But I appreciate you taking time to talk about this particular issue. I have one question for you. I am on Patreon. This podcast is on Patreon. I have not.
Awesome.
I have not been delivering to some of my high-level patrons. I overpromised, and nobody seems to be complaining. And I really appreciate my patrons. But what do you think I should do? Should I reach out to them directly and apologize? Should I make amends? Should I restructure my tiers? What do you think? What does this must happen a lot? This must be a thing that happens where people.
So the first thing is you're not alone. You're not alone. We actually have a writing team that writes about this exact problem. We've contracted a bunch of writers who have a bunch of articles now up on the Patreon website about this kind of thing. So first of all, a lot of creators overpromise.
Yeah.
And then they realize, oh fuck, this is exhausting. I can't do this. And the terrible thing is most creators don't know and don't realize that membership is fluid. That like you're supposed to change your tiers over time, and it's not a promise that's unbreakable. It's like literally your fans are there because they want to support you and they want you to be successful. And so Pamplemousse went through exactly what you went through. And we reached out to our fans and we said, guys, we're exhausted. This is taking so much time and energy, and it's hurting our ability to actually make music and videos. Do you mind if we restructured our tiers? And there was like hundreds of comments who were like, oh my God, we don't want you to feel that way. Of course, restructure the tiers. What do you have in mind? How about if you did something like this? And it kind of became like a community thing to restructure our tiers. And we got the feedback. We sent out an email. It worked so well. It was so great. We actually saw a big boost in patronage. We do it every 6 months. We restructure our tiers based on what we've learned and what's working, what's not. So absolutely. Restructure, go to those folks, write an email, say this is taking me too much time. It's exhausting. I need to focus on podcasts, which is what they want anyway.
I will say I woke up this morning and I saw a few, not a lot, but a few patrons had upped their monthly tier. And I thought, this is an emotional response. I hadn't made any promises or changed anything. This is an emotional response to the conditions around us right now, that some people are saying, I value this thing and I want to make sure it's supported right now. It really meant something to me. It was meaningful.
I mean, it's kind of how I started this call. Like, I was just grateful to you that you were thinking to do this and to call up people who have something to say about this and to be a voice for the community. Like, that's probably how your fans feel too. They're probably like, thank God. Thank God. And so, that feeling, comes along with the ability to freaking be a patron of the arts now. I think people are psyched to do that. And now more than ever, artists and creators are I really think more than ever, are so needed in times like this to help people chill out and to help people kind of get a break from the press and from fear. And it's such an important thing to be creative and to be filling the world with positivity right now. There's a lot of shit going on, and it's nice to have a break.
Thank you, Jack. I really appreciate it, and thanks for all that you've been doing. Take care and wash your hands.
Okay. Oh, you too. All right. Bye.
Be well. Bye-bye.
I guess you gotta learn how to do this.
Lage London, Joy Dragland.
Hello.
Hey. We're busy.
What time is it there?
Quit calling. We're busy.
What are you busy doing?
We're busy.
Drinking wine.
Yeah, now it's 1 o'clock. Today was the first day of like 31 days in a row of just family time, homeschooling.
Yeah.
Getting kids to run the yard. And
when you consider the idea of having to be locked in your house for 30 days, all things considered, isn't it better that you live in a place that has a yard?
Oh my Lord. Oh, I can't tell you how many times I've thought about like this. I mean, we're so lucky.
Like if this were happening to you in your apartment in Brooklyn, it would probably be a totally different story.
It would be a nightmare. And also I'd be like wiped out by like, a week from Tuesday.
Right.
Be like, oh yeah. So yeah, no, we're incredibly fortunate. For most people, it's like they don't have a cushion.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of like it's gonna quickly be like really crazy for So I was like, especially yesterday, I was like reaching out to people that I know are in that situation. It's like, man. Yeah.
And they canceled school obviously too, so you can't teach.
Well, they canceled school, but it's more civilized here, so I still get paid, and I'm doing like just try to set it up like. I'm sending out homework and I'm going to do Skype, lessons and stuff like that.
I was thinking about this also. Like in Norway, is there enough of a welfare state that they would look after people if they lost their jobs?
Yeah, there's an infrastructure here, Leo. Infrastructure here.
Yeah.
Tell them what happened today.
So what happened today is that, they're basically shutting down everything. And then I guess if you have a small business in Norway and somebody is on sick leave, then the employer is supposed to cover that for 2 weeks, I guess, 16 days. Yeah. But as of today, they like made different measures. So the small businesses, I guess, are responsible for 2 days of paid sick leave. And then after that, the state covers the rest.
Wow.
But that's, I mean, if you work for small business, they haven't done like as far as musicians and stuff, the only thing they've done is that any sort of grants or support they've given to tours and stuff that got canceled, they don't expect that back. But it's usually very. I mean, I had a tour coming up in a couple of weeks, and they gave like a tiny bit of stuff and a little bit of the flight costs and stuff. So I get to keep that, but of course I don't know what's going to happen with the flights because I know I can change them, but I don't need to go to those places without the gig. So,
and do you think the gigs might get rescheduled? I mean, it's possible they'll get rescheduled, right?
I mean, that's what they're saying, but you know how a tour works. You need to have them like back to back.
Yeah.
If those get spread out like one here, we'll reschedule at different times. The whole thing is out.
I really think that for the purposes of this conversation, in the context of all of the other conversations I've had today, thinking about you being in the two of you having just moved to Norway and what this same experience, because one way or the other, this is going to happen to you, whether or not it happened that you still lived in New York or that you live in Norway, and how disruptive it is either way, but it just feels like more civilized to have it happen to you there.
Well, it's really just because I have that gig,
Yeah.
Because it's the first time I've ever had like a thing like that, like a cushion in that way.
Yeah.
It covers most of like the basic things, but
right.
It's like
it's not everything, but it's not nothing.
It's not like we're not looking at like not homelessness or
right.
like just not having money to buy milk yet.
Yeah.
So it would have happened pretty quickly.
It would have been very quickly in New York. It's just like, like I said, we're really lucky with that. And to have, we have space, we have a yard, we can be like basically quarantined and it's totally possible to do that for us. But New York, I mean, it's just impossible. It would have been impossible. We're a little bit ahead of you guys here,
Yeah.
Things really changed really quickly in about 3-4 days from like, oh yeah, no, this is going to be a disruption.
Yeah.
To be like, oh no, this is like on uncharted territory, you know.
But the thing I wonder about is, and I think I feel that here already. I mean, it's like yesterday everything got canceled. You know, like Broadway was closed by the end of the day. The NBA was closed. Like they just shut down everything. That same morning or 2 days ago, you know, I woke up and I was like, oh, I wonder if I'll go to this gig tonight. You know, I'm thinking, and then by the end of the day, it was like, oh, that gig's not happening. No gigs are happening. Like nothing is happening. But the question I think we're having here is, to what extent is the government able to shut stuff down? I mean, you're talking about a small country that understands, and like Joy was telling me, and not only understands, but like trusts the government. You know, we're talking in the States, we don't have that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's more controlled here, and there is sort of a safety net here, you know, for like the average person compared to what's over there.
Are they telling you no contact there, or are they saying limited contact?
They're saying
stay home.
They're saying stay home. They're saying like, like basically, if you have kids and stuff, like let the grandparents stay home. You know,
don't have the grandparents babysit.
Yeah, and like don't go to your like vacation house or whatever, because those are always in like small communities.
Yeah,
they don't have the infrastructure to deal with like 10 times the population of like the permanent residents. You know, stuff like that.
Good luck to you. Wash your hands. Don't go crazy. We'll be talking to you.
Okay. Bye. Dad. Bye.
Ciao. There it was, my friends, the COVID Chronicles Volume 1, talking to people about what this means and what we can do. I have a feeling I'll be back again very soon with another series of these conversations. Until then, stay safe, wash your hands. I'll talk to you soon.